Hi, everybody. I'm Frank Stanisci of Candid Frank Live, where you'll find us airing our views here on the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku, Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now on Candid Frank Live, joining me as usual is Aaron William Freeland. Hi, Aaron. Still got that nasty friggin'. I still got that silly cold, and it's really debilitating sometimes.
It seems like it's really doing a number on you there, Frank. I
Yeah.
don't envy it or you.
Well, it is what it is. Listen, let's carry on with business and let's uh, let's be as usual. F1, the record, second place, and Las Vegas.
So it was a very, very interesting weekend in Qatar. Uh, we had uh, we had a first-time race winner. We had someone clinch the championship by finishing second, and he went on the next day to win the next race. So with 5 rounds of the season still to go, Max Verstappen has now locked up his third F1 championship behind the wheel of that rocket of a Red Bull. So, you know, status quo as it currently stands. He has 14 wins so far this season, not including sprints, and needs one more win to match his own record of 15 from last year. Red Bull has 16 and would need to win 4 of the last 5 races to beat the record of 19 wins in the season set by Mercedes drivers Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton back in 2016.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Oh man, let's talk about the MLS. Toronto's FC road misery continues. They continue to lose on the road
Now, the good news is that Toronto FC will be unlikely to have any more road losses this season.
because they're not playing on the road.
They're done with the road portion of their
Oh, so they
season.
won't be losing on the road.
No, they won't be losing on the road anymore this season. They lost 3-0 to the New York Red Bulls in front of 24,506 at Red Bull Arena. They actually managed to have a perfect away record this season with 0 wins. Um, so yeah, it hasn't been good for the Reds this particular season. They're actually 4-19-10 and are 1-14-0 in all competitions under Dunfield. John Herdman is going to be taking over after this particular game. Dunfield's record, unfortunately, is he wasn't able to pull a David Copperfield and make their losing streak disappear. So it is what it is. Um, but just to underscore the importance of how huge and how vital the first goal is. TFC is now 0-17-1 when it concedes the first goal in a game.
The problem with them isn't about concession of the first goal. It's about them scoring their first goal.
If they get on the boards first, then yeah, that's
I mean, if they
usually a
get on
good
the board
sign.
at all, the problem is they got to get on the board, whether it's at the beginning or the end of the game. Either way, like here, it was 3-0, so there was no answer, and there hasn't been an answer for that team offensively. In fact, their offense has been offensive, and not in a good way. Their new coach, Herdman, experienced head coach, worked for Canada, did some magic for Canada, both for the women and the men in that order. So this is a guy that understands world soccer. And as much as this is a North American soccer league, it relies heavily on some European talent and also the ability to play against well coached teams, which international soccer has plenty of. So Toronto FC right now has just, it seems they're either terrible or they're great. There has not been an in between for this team. If you want, unless you want to call, those years in there when around the championship. But as best I can recall, and you can help me, we went there before they won the championship, you and I, and the team at that time was starting to not be terrible, right? And then they went to winning, and then all of a sudden they flipped. They went from winning to being terrible again. And you know, it's funny. You know, the other team that plays at BMO, you know, had that kind of reputation up until, you know, Pinball Clemens came to the Toronto Argonauts. They suffered the same fate where they would be horrible one year and great another. And it's amazing how organizations fall into that trap and they can't get out. But as you said, the important thing is here Herdman now is taking responsibility for the team. He's had time to, you know, behind the scenes figure out his players, have a look at what's going on, because you and I both know there's going to be a big change on TFC. There are players who are there today who will not be there tomorrow. And the question is going to be, can Herdman, for the third time, move into an organization that was struggling and turn it around? He did it with the women, our national women. He did it with our national men. And now we'll see if he can do it with our local, if you live in the Toronto, Ontario area.
Just to give you an idea of how big of a hill Herdman has to climb here, TFC's been outscored 25-0 in its last 8 road outings. Its last away goal was in the 11th minute of a 2-1 loss at New England, June 24th. Their goalless drought now stands at 799 minutes, and their last road victory was August 27th, 2022 in Charlotte. So they've set a
Like I
new
said,
record for futility.
like I said, it's impossible to win if you can't score. That's just simple math. You need to do more than zero. Even in soccer, where one can suffice for a victory, you still have to get more than zero to win.
And
Even in soccer.
they've been suffering from a lot of injuries as well. Lorenzo Insigne is out, Temi Atanolu is out, Latif Blessing is out, Adama Diomande, Sean Johnson Kerr, Greg Ranjit Singh, Sigurd Rosted, and Brendan Servania. They're all injured. They had to sign an 18-year-old defender from TFC2 just to make sure they had enough numbers to play.
Well,
So
health has been an issue with that team, and unfortunately, next man up has not worked for them at all. It seems that when a player goes down, that player's not getting replaced, no matter who they bring in. Well, you know, here's to working things out. I mean, you know, Bill Manning's a friend of the show, and you know, he's got a challenge here with this team. You know, in fact, I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, and he says to me, you know, Frank, would you have thought 5, 6 years ago the team I'd have the most trouble with is my TFC team? You
you
know,
know,
that was a legitimate question.
I cannot find the lie. They are a consistent problem. So
Absolutely. Let's go to the NBA. And Dylan Brooks ejected 5 minutes into the Rockets' debut for punching Daniel Thies in the really
yeah,
in
well,
another region.
after playing absolutely fantastic with Team Canada and helping them seal up an Olympic berth just a few weeks ago, Dylan the villain punched Daniel Thies in the junk. What happened was Thies showed up to set a pick, and uh, as the player went past him, Dylan turned around and just popped him in the junk as he went by. Um, he was assessed a flagrant 2 and tossed out of the game. I think the fans enjoyed it. Despite the fact that they're now short a player, that sort of thing is kind of entertaining. But yeah, he promises to be very physical in the paint. So
Oh my goodness. Oh,
yeah,
that's crazy. Well, here's sad news. Raptors' first ever head coach, Brendan Malone, dies at age 81.
yeah, Malone was a great guy who left behind a huge legacy in the world of basketball. Unfortunately, he did pass away at the age of 81. It was announced by the Denver Nuggets. They did announce his passing. However, at this time, they have not released the actual cause of death. So, uh, you know, um, he led the Raptors during their inaugural season. Toronto finished 21 and 61 in that season, including that win that everybody was at the Sky Dome for
Absolutely.
against the Chicago Bulls in overtime.
Both. Yeah.
But his legacy in the NBA means that he's going to be sadly missed. So our condolences to his
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Let's talk about the CFL, and we're we're careening down the end of the schedule, and by careening I mean some interesting games, and there are teams that are flaming out. At first of all, we've got two opposites in the first game. The Rough Riders lose to the Ticats 38-13 at home on a very special day for 34. The 2013, and 13 is a big number in Saskatchewan, especially for the Rough Riders. They lose with them in attendance. It's just they could not do anything right. They weren't motivated. The coach said, "I can't believe how flat they were." And there's a lot of calls for the coaches firing at this point. Aaron, what do you see from your news perspective?
I mean, look, there's got to be something behind Bo Levi Mitchell coming back. I know he hasn't exactly been spectacular this season. Um, he returned to the roster this week after suffering from a fractured right leg. Um, he played the first quarter. He completed 4 or 6 passes for over 125 yards and a touchdown. He looked comfortable. But I think they might have done the right thing by making sure that they took him out. Um, Orlando Steinauer said he was considering giving him additional playing time, but we stuck to a plan that we were going to play him for a quarter. Was it tempting? Sure. But they were very happy with what they saw out of him. And Hamilton just demolished the roughies. It was not fun.
Their quarterbacking situation did an about face. As much as their number three did a great job, my faith at the beginning of the season was in Schultz. I felt he was a quarterback that would surprise many. And well, I think he surprised a lot of people, but he hasn't surprised me. He is a really good quarterback. And now they have a 1-2 and 2A punch. They have three quarterbacks that, for a short time can hold things out, right? But it's all, this is Bo Levi Mitchell's team. This is Bo Levi is the guy that Hamilton, they threw a lot of ducats at him. And so, there's no surprise here that they're relying on his presence. And then just going to be a question of who do we get? Who does Hamilton get? Do they get the quarterback from 5 years ago? Do they get the quarterback for the past few years? That's going to be the issue. And to be sure, I think they insulated him a little bit by saying, "Look, just play a quarter. Let's get you back into playing a full game," and they can afford to do it because, quite frankly, I don't know that they'll catch Montreal, but I know they won't get caught by Ottawa. So they're in the playoffs now. They're almost no different than the Toronto Argonauts. They can sit back now on and make sure that they rest players based on the playoffs. And that's what the whole season means. We watch these teams play all year, and the only thing that matters during the regular season is making the playoffs. Admittedly, if you can finish first, that's great because then you only have one game to go to the Grey Cup. But still, it's about making the playoffs. And the better you do to get into the playoffs, the better. But you're not going to kill yourself to try and reach somebody, I think. And I think that's what Hamilton is saying. And guess what? It worked great for them in this game.
It certainly did.
The Alouettes defeated the Red Blacks 29-3, and the Red Blacks reverted back to their embarrassing selves, and it's really too bad. Ottawa fans deserve a lot better than this, and I don't know. There has to be a change in Ottawa. As much as Ruffy fans are complaining, I think the Red Black fans have to ask some questions too, because the organization is not looking better this year than they were last year, or the year before that, or the year before that, or the year before that. So, I hate to be a tough taskmaster when it comes to organizations, but the Red Blacks owe their fans a little more than what they've been giving them.
They do, and it's kind of funny. You do kind of want Ottawa to do well, but at the same time, they helped Sean Lemon get his 100th sack, so there is that. Um, his father drove up from Charleston, South Carolina, to catch the game. They'd been asking him about whether or not he'd come up to see games. He says, "Yeah, no, I'm not making the drive up to Montreal for no reason. It's just too far." So, it just, the Alouettes just demolished them, and there was no mistaking which was the dominant team. Obviously, in this one, there's no, "Oh, it was close," or, "Oh, Ottawa played well, but a few unfortunate bounces." This was a butt kicking. So
Speaking of such, Even though maybe it wasn't a butt kicking, the Bombers did the Lions in to the tune of 34-26. And it seems that when the Bombers are thinking about the game or look like they care about the outcome or work really hard or are playing angry, they're hard to beat. And the Lions have found that out 2 out of 3 times.
Yeah, they've been on the wrong end of the score a couple of times now when playing the Bombers, which is unfortunate for them. I mean, now BC and Winnipeg are both 1 and 2 in the Western Division, so both are going to the playoffs. Technically speaking, this game is more about seeding than anything else. It's unlikely that BC is going to catch Winnipeg at this point. Just looking at the rest of the schedule that both teams have. Uh, but they're in no danger of being chased down by Saskatchewan, Calgary, or Edmonton at this point. So, I mean, this I think is more of an opportunity for them to sit back and analyze game film and try to figure out exactly what went wrong for
You know,
BC and
it's
what went right.
ironic. Sorry, it's ironic as well because when one looks at the East and the West, I see I see a better Eastern Division than a Western Division by virtue of the fact that the aforementioned team, the Rough Riders, look terrible. Right? They look terrible. They look like a team that doesn't look like a playoff team. So the battle for first, I think, with Winnipeg and BC, I think it's a more important victory because the stepping up to the Eastern or Western final, I should say, looks to be a lot easier for the Lions against Saskatchewan than it does with the Ticats and the Alouettes. You know, I really think that game favors the Argonauts because those two teams are really good and they're ready to play right now as things look today. Now, things can change in the next couple of games. Maybe Saskatchewan will discover some sort of, I don't know, intensity that they lack. But if they play like the way they played, second place ain't such a bad deal in the West, as bad anyway as it is in the East.
This is very true. It's more of a dogfight in the East than it is in the West. At least in the West, things are a little more clear cut at this point because
Absolutely.
Saskatchewan at 6-10 isn't catching BC at 11-5.
Yeah,
So no matter how you slice it.
we can't just because a team doesn't look like they're up to the competition doesn't mean they won't be. Football's a one game and that's it. All everything's on the line based on one game. So the Riders can come up strong in that game, and Hamilton or Montreal could come up weak. But statistically speaking, and trending, at least seeing it how it's trending with these teams, I'd rather be the Argos, knowing those two teams are playing against each other, than Winnipeg if they beat the Lions, and they're going to just walk over, basically. If this is what Saskatchewan does, I guess I'm giving the impression I'm very disappointed in Saskatchewan. I truly am. I have a lot of friends there, and I can't imagine how heartbreaking it is for them this year because they had so much hope.
No, they definitely did going into this season. There was a lot of talk about, a new team and a revamped offense and doing everything for the betterment of the team, but it just doesn't seem to have worked out that way. Give me about 2 seconds here, Frank, and I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll carry on with the Argos Elks, and the Toronto Argonauts, of course, have already cemented first place overall. The Elks were looking to maintain their existence in a playoff race. Needless to say, their first victory would have meant elimination or a victory by one of the teams in front of them. So the Elks now are no longer vying for the playoffs. How are they entering the next season? Much better than a few other teams. I would say they're going into next year better than Ottawa, and of course better even than Saskatchewan. Because if if I were the Western, I'd be more concerned about playing the Elks, the team that's been playing the way they have in recent games, rather than the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who have not been playing well in the last few games.
No, they really have been, and I think it's indicative of the way the last few games have gone for them. They've just come up a little bit short. Well, I mean, with the exception of this weekend when they played the Argonauts and lost 35-12. Um, but that you're playing a highly motivated Argonauts team at home. For their 150th anniversary with guys like Ricky Ray, Condrich, Holloway, Damon Allen, Chad Owens, and Daryl Mitchell watching on. So of course, the double blue want to perform well there. Um, But yeah, I mean the closest that they actually managed to get was 28-12 uh, at the end of the third, but that was it. Cameron Dukes managed to lock it away with a 1-yard touchdown run, his second of the game, at the 5:51 mark of the fourth quarter to make it 35-12, and that was it. Now, Toronto has basically gone undefeated at home. They are 7-0 at BMO, sorry, and 1-0 in Halifax. So, technically speaking, touchdown Atlantic was, I believe, another home game for them. So,
Yeah, they're undefeated at home, which is a great feat for a team. And if they can remain undefeated the rest of the season, well, more importantly, the playoff game that they're going to play, then they'll have a perfect record at home, and they'll be able to go to their favorite town to play football, and that is Hamilton, to represent Toronto in the Grey Cup and the East. But we'll see about that. There's two teams that I really think are they have a shot. I don't think anyone, Bo Levi Mitchell included, Montreal with Cody Fajardo, those teams, they can beat Toronto. Any of those three teams, I think, can end up in the Eastern Final. It'll be interesting to see which team does, in fact. The West
managed
is,
to pull it
it
out.
seems to be right now between BC and Winnipeg. Saskatchewan does not look like a playoff contender.
No, they unfortunately they don't, and their play as of late has contributed to that. But like you mentioned before, Frank, it's a one and done, so it's
That's
entirely
it.
possible they may
It's
manage to
true.
turn it around.
All they have to do is straighten out for one game and figure out what it's like to be a team, I guess. Because right now they're not playing like a team. Anyway, if you can't get up for a home game with the home crowd behind you, Aaron, I don't know what to say as far as
Yeah.
motivating a team, right, or players within a team. Let's talk about this story. I'm sorry, I can't not laugh at this story. Should the NHL refs speak to the media? And
I mean,
apparently players are talking about it, and they refer to get it from the horse's mouth. Some people would call it a different orifice, but you know what I mean. This is just hilarious. Not in a million years. But go ahead and tell the story. I'll humor you, Aaron.
well, I thought it was something worth mentioning because as fans, we get frustrated by certain calls, and as players, you're going to get frustrated by certain calls, and even as a video coach, you're going to get annoyed by certain calls. But it's easy to make judgments in hindsight when everything is
Absolutely.
slowed down and analyzed frame by frame by frame. The NBA does their 2-minute drill where they go over everything that happened in the last 2 to 5 minutes of the game, and
That's better.
as that is a great
That's
idea. I'm a
better.
huge fan of that. You know, uh, th- they have something called an umpire tracker for Major League Baseball, which lets you know how accurate the umpires are being, balls and strikes and all that sort of fun stuff. So I think it would be beneficial for players, and it would also be very beneficial for fans to see what the referees see while they're on the ice, and better help them understand why certain calls aren't made the way that fans think they should be. Um, you know, um,
I guess, Aaron, but I think what it should be is the NHL should review. Like there have been so many calls in the National Hockey League, and you know my feeling about it, and it sounds like I favor my hometown. I don't mind saying that it's my hometown, and I don't mind telling you that I pull for Toronto. But the fact is, we've seen some really hellacious missed calls, and then we've seen some that are diametrically opposed to the way they call them. Like there's no consistency, and then there's an about face. What should happen, I think, is there should be, there should be a review of the referees, and I believe that the media has a right to ask questions about calls. Explain to me why, for example, and I'm just strictly going to do it from the Toronto perspective, where the Toronto media should ask. They should say, how is it that a young rookie is thrown in the air, tossed to the ice, and there's no penalty? What's your explanation? And it can't be one of those explanations 2 days later where the league puts out a couple of words. right there they should have to explain why that wasn't a penalty. And if they can't explain it, then they need to prove that there's something being done to ensure that that kind of stuff doesn't happen again, which is why they have the 2-minute review in the NBA, which is why they have umpires under review. In other words, you make the referees accountable. I'm not a big fan of asking referees why they do things. Somebody might slip and say, "Well, I don't like that team."
It's entirely possible that something like that could happen. What's that guy's name? Tim something or other. The
Tim
guy that
Peel.
got fired for,
Tim Peel.
yeah, that's the guy talking about directly managing the game.
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing you don't necessarily want to hear.
But how does a guy say that and the league had no idea?
I think that's more of a face saving thing.
But
It's
again, I repeat, how does a guy say that? It's a feeling he has. It's the way he refs, and he has another ref on the ice, and he has a referee supervisor watching his every call, and he can't tell that he manages games dependent on how he feels that moment, or imposing his opinion of how he should ref that game based on what he thinks he needs to do, instead of calling the game according to how it's played. You know what I mean? Like, no, no, that situation proved deeply that the NHL refereeing is flawed. That's not that's the tip of the iceberg, Aaron. That's not an exception. That's a tip of the iceberg. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say when I say that.
I
That
100% do. And the NHL seems to be tone deaf a lot of times and kind of out of touch with what the
Well,
fans
I
want.
think
So
they're under Gary Bettman. He's brought that NBA attitude where they feel they need to make sure that the right team wins, and that's what the NBA did back in the day. They've learned not to do it, but Gary Bettman came from the NBA. He has that NBA mentality where he feels he needs to help decide who wins the cup because it might be better for the bottom line of the league.
can you imagine how much merchandise they would sell if the Leafs actually won a cup?
Well,
I know Gary doesn't watch our show. He's never been a
he
fan.
doesn't care what
But
we.
by the same token, can you imagine the amount of merchandise they would sell?
But you see, it's not about merchandise. It's not about making more money for the league. It's about pacifying certain groups within the National Hockey League that Bettman is responsible for being grateful that he is the commissioner because they brought him in, and or the group of owners that he feels he needs to protect for whatever reason he feels, because that happens in the National Hockey League. There's so many inconsistencies with what goes on, and I don't think. Sorry, folks. I just don't think it's a coincidence that no Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup since what was it, 1993?
Yeah, I'm not entirely
Follow the
convinced
money
it's
is
a
what I
coincidence.
say.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm not convinced it's a coincidence that no Canadian team has won in 30 years either. So
And I'll throw a little opinion about that. They don't Canadian teams don't have to win cups to keep their fans. But I can't say the same for the rest of the teams.
that,
That's
as
my
far as I'm
nugget.
concerned, that's a very fair assessment.
They don't have to. The Canadian teams don't have to sell winning. They just sell their fans are so passionate, and that's why I don't like Bettman, and that's why I think he's a terrible owner when it comes to Canadian hockey fans. He tipped his hand early, and now he's slinked behind the curtain a little bit. But the result's the same. Follow the money is all I got to say in that regard.
And I can't say you're entirely wrong on that one.
Well, the facts tell the truth. One would have to assume that every ownership group since 1993 on the Canadian teams are a bunch of morons, and they can't even accidentally win a cup. Now, how many
Yeah,
teams
I
have
mean, at this
accidentally won
point
cups?
here, 30 years of 7 different teams not even getting a sniff of the cup does
Well,
seem
they
to
got
me
to the
to
cup, but that's yeah. I'd call that a sniff. Getting to the Stanley Cup
fair.
is a sniff. But what you're talking about, a real like just right bottom line, it's about winning, and by winning at least once. One Canadian team. If you do the math, it's 1993, 30 years times 7. That's 210 years of futility. That makes the Leafs history not look so bad.
When you put it in context like that, yeah, I mean, we're still responsible for 1/7 of it.
Yeah, and
So
considering that the Canadian hockey fans have inordinately and unfairly subsidized the National Hockey League through television contracts the past 15, 20 years more than the American teams have. Again, that's my proof that they need to make American teams win because they need to raise the profile of the National Hockey League in the U.S. And if I were to say something terrible about the ownership in the in of the Canadians, is that they're too afraid to say something or they're too afraid to do something. Like I said, if any other team had what happened to Nyes happened, right? I just don't see the Bruins slinking quietly into the night. I don't
now
see
somebody
any
would have
other
gotten
team.
broken.
Something would have happened.
Yeah.
Something would have happened, and that's again, that's something that we're talking about a violent hit that took a player out, and there was no punishment. When the National Hockey League makes sometimes determinations on suspensions based on injuries. Okay, let's go to the Habs.
So yeah, Jonathan Drouin had taken some time off. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but took some significant time
Yep.
off for mental health. He is currently with the Colorado Avalanche, but he did actually speak out about his leave of absence during the 2020-2021 season. He said, for those who've never played in a Canadian, a major Canadian hub, until you live it, no one is really ready for it. He had to deal with a lot of anxiety, um, and his decision to go back to team up with Nathan McKinnon in Colorado is I think one of the major contributing factors to him actually finally seeking out mental health support. His body, he says, literally shut off on me. I remember the first practice and came to the hotel room and started feeling sick, started feeling tired, starting having panic attacks. He thought he was sick. He thought it was a fever or something, but the doc realized later, no, it's not actually that. You're actually having a panic attack because playing where you're playing is not helping you.
How hard it must be to be a French Canadian playing in Montreal. That's that. As much as you and I aren't big Habs fans, which I'm not, I still, these are people we're talking about. And I can't imagine the stress that it is to be a French Canadian player playing in Quebec and how special the ones who have been successful, especially in recent years in Montreal, who have overcome that pressure. And it's tough. We talk about the Leafs and it being a pressure cooker in every other Canadian town. Don't get me wrong. But it's a little different because being a French Canadian in Montreal, where the media there, oh, Aaron, they're so tough on their own there, and they're so tough when I say their own on the Montreal Canadiens that, it's you got to find somebody that speaks French to be a general manager. Then they go the complete opposite and get an American one. They've done that a few times now, at least twice that my recollection says that they brought in an American GM who doesn't speak French. So, there's something to be said for, the difficulty of playing for a team when the expectations on an individual are so, I don't know, so I want to use the word unfairly. I don't know if that's the right word, but overtly difficult for them to handle. uh, it's a gauntlet for them. Being a French kid on the Montreal Canadiens, it's a gauntlet that you're in. You want to win so bad because of who you are and where you're from, and it's so tough. So I feel sorry for this kid. The best thing for him to do is to go out of Montreal, and hopefully in Colorado he'll find his game and enjoy life again, because it sure sounded to me like he wasn't enjoying life.
Yeah, it sounded like he was really on a rough road. And I'll be honest, for snorts and giggles, I did actually listen to some Montreal sports radio, and they are way tougher on their players than Toronto media ever has been or ever will be. That is a true crucible for sports players when it comes
They're
to
as
that sort of thing.
tough on their players as the fans in Toronto are on their players. You take the most negative people in Toronto talking about Leaf players, that's what the Montreal media is like.
They
That's
are
no way to,
savage.
and it's no way to live, man. It's terrible, and that could be an explanation as to why they don't win. I don't know. But let's talk about the ongoing evolving of the Canadians as they seek growth to rebuild continues for another season.
So there have been a lot of words that have been used around the Habs since the time that they went all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Um, you know, one of the words that hasn't been used a lot around the Habs is the word playoffs. You're more likely to hear growth, progress, and evolution. Nick Suzuki's only 24 years old. Cole Caulfield is only 22. They're a very, very young team. Even with their supposed wonderkin Yuri Slafkovsky that they picked up. It's been a tough row for them because nobody seems to be playing up to expectations. Now, they are looking to go from 31st to 28th to something significantly better than that this season. But the problem is that the division that they're in is just a murderer's row of teams. You've got Tampa, Boston, Toronto, Florida, Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit. That Atlantic division is just absolutely stacked.
Terrible. It really is. It's stacked and it's very difficult. It's well, they're an organization. That needs to figure things out, and we just talked about the pressure the players are under. Don't think management isn't under that pressure too. I think that's part of the reason why it's not a bad idea to have an American there. Just looks at him cross-eyed and goes, "What are you talking about anyway? What is this?"
I mean, the thing is, most of their players are under 25, so they do have an additional 2 years to mature. So that's
Well,
that's another thing to take
good
into
luck to
account.
them. Good luck to them. Another team that really has had a tough road. Um, Again, involving players, much like Calgary, the Jets have had a hard time keeping their stars. Two of their stars, Shifley and Hellebuck, have decided to stay with the team, sign contracts that are identical.
This was a huge question mark for the Winnipeg Jets coming through the off season here, and I'm glad they actually managed to get this done when they did, with the season starting yesterday. Um, Both Shifley and Hellebuck were both signed to identical 7-year, 8.5 million AAV deals. This gets them in just under the wire before the season actually starts, so that the team doesn't have to pay them prorated, and for an exorbitant amount, like what happened with William Nylander when he held out, until December. But it also shows a commitment from both Shifley and Hellebuck to sticking around for the long term. I know heading into the off season, Hellebuck had made comments along the lines of, "I'll win a Stanley Cup. I don't care where. It's either here or somewhere else." I think with this re-upping for 7 years, it seems fairly obvious that he's made the commitment to stay in Winnipeg. This is a
And
good
great
sign
for
for the
them.
team going forward, mainly because it's hard enough to keep people in Winnipeg as it is already. Now that you've got these two stars that have decided they're in for the long haul, that makes decision making for other players a little bit easier.
You go across the country, the National Hockey League teams, there's a lot of pressure on them to win, and all the players feel it. And we've heard players and we've seen players who have left Canadian cities because they've quite honestly admitted that there's just too much pressure, and I like the beach.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't blame them.
I don't blame them either, but it doesn't speak well to fair, it doesn't speak to sportsmanship, that's for sure. It doesn't speak to that. It speaks to, okay, this league here is for the players, not for the fans. That's what it says to me. And that's what infuriates me. That is this a league for the fans or is it a league for the players? I understand players are people. I've stood and just in this show, I've talked about players as human beings. But I think fans are human beings too, and they have a right to feel that their players are all in and that the league offers their teams as much of a chance to win as any other team without having extra hills to climb. And that's the infuriation. So it's very difficult to sell the league on being professional when they can't ensure every team has a chance to win equally.
No, that's a fair observation, and you know
Okay.
what? It's a big step.
Yeah, well, it'll never happen, but you know what? At least individual teams can try.
Yep.
It is what it is. Let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers signed defenseman Bo Akey to a 3-year entry level contract.
Yeah, Bo was a second round 56th overall pick in the 2023 draft. He had 11 goals and 36 assists for 47 points in 66 games last season was in with the Barrie Colts. He had a goal and 2 assists through 4 games with Barrie so far this season. They decided to take a chance on him. He did actually perform well during the preseason, so there were no glaring errors or anything like that. So the Oilers felt comfortable tendering him with a 3-year deal.
An opportunity opens up for a woman, Megan Mickelson. She's feeling very lucky because she has the new role as Flames commentator, first female to do so.
Yeah, what's really neat is Megan is actually a two-time Olympic gold medalist. She's played forward as well as defense for Team Canada. Um, Sportsnet 960 announced that she would be taking over after longtime color analyst Peter Labardi has moved on to a new role as a reserve list scout for the team. It's been very exciting, she said. It was a summer where she got approached with this potential opportunity and really had to get a crash course in it. She's always been a video nerd and has always analyzed her own games. So the opportunity to do it for the NHL now and actually get paid for it was just huge. Um, Sportsnet actually first approached her in 2020 when she got to be part of an intermission panel for the Oilers broadcast with Gene Principe. Um, After that, she continued to participate. Those of you who watched and followed the Edmonton games will certainly recognize her from that. But stepping into color commentary is going to be fairly interesting. I'll be looking forward to seeing how she does.
Absolutely, I'm sure she'll do fine. Qualification, former player, I think, winning gold medals in the Olympics, I think qualifies as a player who understands the game. I can't see how anybody would doubt that. Let's talk about the Canucks, and they are fitting into our conversation here when we talk about them slow talking about the playoffs, and they want to make people understand the team needs to grow and develop rather than create these hurried up expectations that are unrealistic.
There's nothing that's more detrimental to young hockey players' development and to a team's development than trying to rush and cash in and get into the playoffs. There's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a little bit of time to get there. And I think the fact that the Canucks are taking a step back, I mean, even Bruce Boudreau said at the start of the last season, hey, look, you're not going to like this, but if we do make the playoffs, that's not going to go well for us. So, that's part of it there. I mean, Vancouver finished 38, 37, and 7, which was good enough for sixth in the Pacific. Boudreau was fired and replaced by Rick Tocchet. Tocchet is their third coach in the past 3 seasons. So, you can understand them dialing it back. A lot of people are asking what's actually wrong with the Vancouver Canucks. And um, I know I'm going to lose followers over this one, but I believe their problem has a last name, and it's Aquilini. And he needs to stop interfering in this team and let his staff that he's hired specifically to run his team do their jobs.
If one looks at the
So,
coach's personality, I doubt that he's the kind of guy who's going to be patient. He is a winner. He likes to win wherever he's been. He wants to win. And this team will have to learn how to win if they're going to stay on his team. So there will be pressure on the players to prove that they can be part of a playoff eventuality, I'll say. Will it be this year? Goodness knows. But I think what management is saying is that let's give the whole organization a chance to reset and also, create a winning atmosphere, not so much through expectation, but through execution.
yeah, as Talk had said, I understand that for the fans, for the media, and whatnot, the start to your season is big around here. But we got to do it one step at a time, one brick at a time. We've got to set down a proper foundation before we start going great guns with this thing. Otherwise, it's not going to end well for us.
As per the back then, when before they signed their big four, right after the captain came into town, I said all along from them, and I keep repeating it. And here is another example of what the Leafs need. They need a young player to play like a seasoned veteran. Is it what they expect of Noah Gregor? I'm not sure about that, but they did sign him to a 1-year contract, and at a cheaper rate than the guy they traded away, which is what I've said all along. The more they pay their stars, the less they can afford to play the other teams. And it creates a gap, a talent gap from the top to the bottom. And it gives, it, it really requires and it puts a lot of pressure on the scouts and the coaching and their ability to find players that can play like pros, you know, for contracts that old veterans that want to play in Toronto. I'm not naming names, but there was one on defense that's willing to play on the team because he's made enough money and he's willing to pay for less, get paid less, and play a lot harder and play better than his salary. So we'll see. And this is a case of a young player who's showing promise, signing a contract, and they're hoping that his ceiling's a lot higher than some of the other players that they'd have to pay more money.
Now Noah Gregor has been up and down with the Sharks over the course of the past 4 seasons. He's got 51 points. That's 26 goals and 25 assists in 178 games. He had 10 goals and 7 assists in 57 games last season with San Jose. He was a presence coming out here. He had a goal and 2 assists in 5 preseason games for the Leafs. The good news is, with an average annual value of 775, he's sitting pretty when it comes to that sort of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk about the team that we pay a lot of attention to, the Toronto Maple Leafs, some more. Their goaltender Murray undergoes surgery, and from what I understand, he's going to be out 6 to 8 months.
That's correct. Murray is going to be. He actually underwent hip surgery yesterday. And he's going to be out for the next 6 to 8 months after bilateral surgery. All through training camp, we've been talking about Murray being slated for significant surgery, but we never really discussed it. Murray wasn't all bad for the Maple Leafs. He went
No,
14-8-2 with a .903 save percentage last year. You know, yeah. Here's another interesting bright side. The Maple Leafs have also hired Curtis McElhinney.
we remember
Stanley
him.
Cup champion Curtis McElhinney.
Yeah, he won twice with Tampa after he left Toronto.
Yeah, he's been hired as the director of goaltending development and scouting. Jake Muzzin will not be playing this year. He has been named as a pro scout, and Chris Bork has assumed a new role as the college free agent scout. Um, as everybody knows, with Muzzin's neck injury, Treliving said ahead of training camp that the defenseman would be missing the upcoming season, so they're just transferring his responsibilities. McElhinney, who's now 40, actually retired in 2021 after playing with Tampa, Carolina, the Leafs, the Blue Jackets, the Coyotes, the Senators, the Ducks, and the Flames.
Okay, who didn't he play for? No, just kidding.
Right there, that list would actually be shorter. The bad news for the Leafs is that Murray only has 1 season left on a 4-year, $25 million contract. The good news is they get to put his $4.6 million against the cap for LTIR next season. So
And 6 to 8 months works out to April to June.
exactly. There was one other thing I wanted to add here.
Go ahead.
The Maple Leafs game is going to start very shortly if they haven't dropped the puck already. I believe the 48th Highlanders are actually now playing. But listen closely for when the Maple Leafs score, because the word coming out of the front office is that
No, seriously,
it's
all
gone.
notes are gone.
They're changing the goal song. There will actually be 3 or 4 different goal songs throughout the course of the season. They're premiering a new one tonight. Whenever they play an original 6 team, it's going to be a rock and roll tunes from the 60s or 70s. They're going to be playing some updated music when it comes to those next generation games for the kiddos. And there is another piece of music yet to be named, but there's going to be a few little different things. So adios to Hall & Oates, whose song has been deeply polarizing and bears a certain amount of trauma along with it.
Jeez, I can't.
It really does. For a lot of Maple Leafs
I
fans, they
can't
hear Hall & Oates,
believe
they just,
that.
yeah.
It's
So,
boring to me. I wouldn't call it trauma. I call okay, it's time to play a different song. But at least
yeah,
when you heard that song, oh, if you weren't paying attention, Leaf scored.
I just want
One
something a
thing
little more
about.
upbeat. That's all.
Thanks, buddy, for doing this.
Not a problem, Frank.
I apologize for the early technical difficulties. For Aaron William Freeland, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching Candid Frank Live, airing Mondays, Wednesdays, and soon on Fridays when it'll be the Leaf Talk thing. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network. For Candid Frank Live, other news, entertainment, sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. And of course, Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Ciao for now.